Share
Right there,
screen.
record. Okay. Good evening, producer Susan. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jerzee Joe. How are you?
Good. We got our third blizzard of the season yesterday. Some areas got as much as a half an inch. So,
We got about an inch overnight.
all right. You all caught up and ready to go?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. Let me tell you what we're going to cover today. Our quote of the day is going to come from Winston Churchill, who tells us what the biggest problem is with capitalism. I got a great review. Occasionally I get invited to call into some radio shows in Denver, and last week I actually called into a show. They were talking about a topic that I know quite a bit about, and I called in, and the caller who followed me had some very complimentary things to say about the content I provided. So I'm going to play that listener review, if you will. In our stupidest thing I've heard all week, we have yet another report about how many alleged mass shootings the U.S. has experienced so far this year. And that's actually something you sent me. And I hate to beat the dead horse, and we've talked about this before, but it's just one of these absurd claims about how many mass shootings the U.S. has had so far this year. Then in a related story, we have a 60-second clip from a man who's explaining why he opposes most of the newly proposed, what is referred to as common sense gun control laws. And people would say, well, how could anybody be opposed to, quote, common sense gun control laws? Well, that's a label you can hang on almost anything, but just because you label something as such doesn't make it true. In our You Won't Hear This on TV segment, we have three stories. The first one is about New York City auctioning off more than $200 million in new and unused COVID supplies and equipment for less than 1 penny on the dollar. The second is about two illegal immigrants who shot and killed a bald eagle, and the federal government apparently has no desire to prosecute them for doing that. And the third is a story about how Sweden has decided to start paying illegal aliens to leave their country and go home, and why that might be a really good policy for New York City to consider adopting. We'll talk about Russia's population and why it's shrinking and why that shrinkage might be getting even worse. We'll tell you how to be a lot smarter if you have just 12 minutes per day to spare. Would you be interested in being smarter if you could do it by spending 12 minutes a day? Yep. We'll tell you about a chocolate bar company that's fighting back against pronoun wokeness. Tell you about a new protein-enriched ice cream that might not appeal to just everybody. And our taxpayer relief shot comes to us from Orlando, where 4 armed thugs attempt to rob a jewelry store owner who decides to fight back. Again, it's a 4-on-1 situation. You think we can fill 30 minutes?
I'm sure that you will somehow.
I've got 5 or 6 items I had to drop off the list today just to make it fit. If we have any time left over, trust me, I've got 5 or 6 I really wanted to get in but couldn't. Anyway, here's Winston Churchill, the late Winston Churchill, on pointing out the biggest problem with capitalism. And here's the problem he points out. Here's the quote: "The main complaint against capitalism is that it creates an uneven distribution of prosperity." He then adds, "However, the main complaint against socialism is the even distribution of misery." Think about that. And where are all these illegal immigrants coming across the border coming from? They're coming from Venezuela, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, all socialist countries, even Cuban immigrants. Cubans risk their life on homemade rafts to get to Florida. So again, one of the key features of socialism is the even distribution of misery. All right, so you're ready to hear about what by the way, let me preface this with a little plug. There's a radio station in Denver called it's AM 560 KLZ, and in the afternoons, weekdays from 3 to 6, they play a show, Rush to Reason. It's got a conservative tilt to it. Great host, John Rush. I occasionally get invited by John to come in, and he'll ask me to call in on a particular topic, and sometimes I'll just jump on if he's talked about something that I happen to have a lot of background on. And last week the topic was the national debt and the interest on the national debt. So I called in, and John and I did a 10-minute back and forth on what's likely to happen to the interest on our national debt as bond interest rates continue to rise. And here's what this listener said about my comments on the show. Let's see if I can get this to play.
All right, we are back.
Well, let me start this over. Hang on.
All right, we are back. Bob, I got a few minutes here before our next break, so we're going a little bit long there, but go ahead. I'll give you plenty of time. What's up?
Oh, okay. Well, I was listening to Joe there before I was going to bring on my subject matter. He's brilliant. Is that Joe from New Jersey?
It is. That's Jerzee Joe, yes.
Well, other than, I don't ever hear him call on drive radio, but your show, the 1 hour show before drive radio.
Yeah, Fix It Radio, yes.
Yeah, I hear him all the time.
Oh, yeah.
It's brilliant. You ought to put him on your payroll.
Don't tell him that. He'll want to check.
He's just, he is so perfect.
He is. He's spot on, and has his own podcast now. Does a great job, and I've known Joe now for I don't know how many years, and yeah, always great help. I appreciate him greatly.
He's fabulous.
So what do you think, producer Sue? Does that
that great compliments from major city listeners.
from a listener, and I believe he follows the podcast, and but yeah, that was unsolicited. What do you call that?
Bob was his name. Thank you, listener Bob.
Thank you, listener Bob. We appreciate the input. All right. Now the stupidest thing I heard all week is what you sent. Is one of the things you sent me. But let me preface this by asking you a question, producer Sue. Have you ever swum in the ocean?
I have swam in 3 of the 4 oceans.
All right. And if you went down to Florida this weekend, or maybe the Bahamas, would you be afraid to go swimming?
No.
But wouldn't you be afraid of being bitten by a shark?
No.
Well, what if I told you that 2 people a day were being bitten by sharks? Would that make you afraid?
Probably not. The ocean's a big place.
What if I told
There's
you
a lot
10
of
people?
people
What
in
if I
it.
told you 10 people a day or 100 people a day were being bitten by sharks? Would that make you afraid?
At the beach I was swimming in, maybe.
Well, and the reason I do that analogy is that the groups that are opposed to guns in general, I realize we're a little gun centric in this podcast, today's podcast. The anti-gun lobby and the media have this cabal of trying to scare people about guns, and so the thing you sent me that was on CBS Sunday Morning, they put up a graphic on the screen, and it said so far this year, and again we're only 62 days into the year, it said that we've had 7,303 people killed by guns and 94 mass shootings. And I'm looking 62 days, 94. That's more than 2. That's almost 2 a day. Did you hear about the 4 mass shootings this weekend?
No, I did not.
How about the 14 last week?
No.
All right. So the question is, why did they do this? Why do they engage in this exaggerated hyperbole? And the answer is the same reason. If you wanted to scare people about swimming, they engage in this exaggerated hyperbole to change voter sentiment that yeah, we need more gun control. We need more gun control. And I'm going to play a clip about a guy who's opposed to what often gets tried to foist it on the public as common sense gun control. So let me dissect. Now, first of all, where do they get that? And I mentioned this before. There's this rabid anti-gun group called the Gun Violence Archive, and they have come up with their own non-standard definition of a mass shooting. Now, I've mentioned this before in the show, U.S. government definition of a mass shooting, which is very close to what the average American thinks of. It's when a guy goes out in public and just randomly starts to shoot people and kills 4 more people. In fact,
Like the one at Michigan State.
Michigan State,
Yeah.
guy just shows up with a gun in a public place and just starts shooting people at random, killing 4 more. That is the federal definition, and what I think is very close to what the average American thinks of when they hear the term mass shooting. Now, on a Saturday night of Chicago, if 2 groups of opposing gangs start trading pot shots at each other, and when the smoke clears, nobody's dead, but 4 of them wind up in the ER being treated for minor gunshot wounds, would you consider that to be a mass shooting?
No.
But that's what the Gun Violence Archive counts. Anytime 4 more people are hit by gunfire, regardless of how many shooters, whether they knew each other. They classify that as, quote, a mass shooting. So I actually downloaded, you can actually download into an Excel spreadsheet their database. So I did that, and they said 94 mass shootings. And here's what I found. In 38 of the 94, nobody died. In another 28, there was only 1 fatality. Well, guess what? 28 and 38, the last time I looked, is 66, right?
Mhm.
Is 66 more than half of 94?
No.
Yes, 66 is more
Oh,
than
yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. More than half. Yeah. It's more than half.
right. So first of all, in more than half the incidents, there were 0 or 1 fatality. Now, out of that entire list of, quote, 94 mass shootings, how many, and I'm going to tell you the answer. So I looked and said, okay, out of those 90, how many met the definition where there was a single shooter killing 4 more victims at random in a public place? You know how many I came up with?
I'll say 10.
3.
Oh,
And
wow.
here are the 3. Remember the Monterey Bay, California Asian dance hall shootings?
Yes.
That was 1. The Half Moon Bay, California, where the disgruntled mushroom farm worker went back to the mushroom farm and started shooting his coworkers. And you could even argue, since the victims were not, it was not at random in a public place, but let's say, okay, he showed up and he began shooting his coworkers. So that was 2. And then you mentioned the 3rd, Michigan State. That's it, not 94, 3. Now, there were 7 other incidents where 4 more people were killed, but they all took place inside of a home where a family member shot and killed other family members. So yes, 4 more people died, but it wasn't in a public place. They took place inside a private home.
And it wasn't random.
And it wasn't random. The victims were known to the shooter. So again, it's hyperbole. It's hyperbole. It's meant to stir up anti-gun sentiment. And let's talk for 1 minute about the 7,303 quote killed by gunfire. Now you assume that means they were shot and killed. They were murdered, right? They were homicides.
Mhm.
Well, more than 4,000 of that 703 were gun suicides. Now, let me ask you a question. If somebody hangs themselves, are they a victim of rope violence?
No.
If they kill themselves by taking a drug overdose, are they a victim of pill violence?
No.
How about if they cut their wrist with a razor blade? Are they a victim of razor blade violence?
No.
Then, therefore, if you kill yourself with a gun, are you a victim of gun violence?
No.
Because violence is something done by one person to another. But they don't tell you that more than half of that 7,303 were suicides, which is
Death
legal.
by suicide.
Right. Oh, you know what else they threw in there? Justifiable homicides where either a police officer or one of our taxpayer relief shot citizens legally shoots someone who is a threat to themselves or others. They included justifiable homicides. So only about 1/3 of that total figure were actually gun homicide murder. By the way, when a cop justifiably shoots somebody, that is still a homicide, but it's justifiable. So only about 1/3 of that 7,303 were actually unwarranted homicides. So again, exaggerated hyperbole. So let me go and tell you. So all of that is again to gin up support for more gun controls. And I won't even tell you how many existing, but here's a guy who is opposed to most common sense gun controls. And here's what he says.
Session, I've been asked, Nick, why don't you support, quote, common sense gun control laws? Well, let me go ahead and explain this as respectfully as I can. It's not that I don't understand that some people have been touched by violence, and specifically gun violence, in a very, very personal way, and they want to see some justice from that. I completely understand and sympathize. What I don't understand is why anybody thinks it is common sense to take guns away from people that committed no crime in the hopes that it will dissuade people who have already made up their minds that they're going to commit a crime. Now, I get it. Your hope is that if you make it harder to get a firearm, then bad people won't get access to the firearms. And I understand that's your hope. But let me tell you what I can guarantee will happen. If you make it harder for law-abiding citizens to get firearms, they will absolutely find it harder to get firearms because they obey the law in the first place. And I am very skeptical of any sort of, quote, solution or, quote, common sense policy which seeks to diminish the freedoms of people that are doing nothing wrong instead of punishing people that are doing something wrong.
So producer Sue, any thoughts on his comments?
Yeah, the majority of the people, and you referenced the gangs of Chicago, for example. I think Illinois has some of the toughest gun laws in the country, and they have one of the largest gun problems in America.
They're in
Because
the top.
people who obey gun laws are not the problem. It's the people who are breaking the law.
Right. And those 16, 17-year-old, 18 kids, they cannot legally buy or possess a gun, but they all have them. And I know we've talked about, I think last week or the week before, we talked about the ATF report that said in the past 4 years, there's been over 1 million reported gun thefts in this country. Roughly 250,000 a year. And again, 3 homes a minute are broken into in this country, and 1 out of 3 homes of those homes that are broken into will have a gun. So there's a huge supply. I think the estimated inventory of stolen guns available on the street is around 10 million units. And again, the people stealing these guns, a great many of them are not going after the guns. They're drug addicts. They're breaking into homes to buy stuff to sell for drug money. So they'll break into a home. Oh, great, we found a gun, and they'll sell that gun for 50 or $100. It might be a $600 gun, but they're stealing that gun to get some quick cash to buy the next fix. So they're by the way, if you can't go to any major city and buy an illegal gun in 30 minutes, you're not working, you're really not looking hard enough.
And with the exception of the gang violence, if you look at all of these mass shootings, or even those that are not qualified as mass shootings, the suicides, the family murders, we don't have a gun problem. We have a mental health problem in this country.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's really mental health. We have evil and crazy people. We have a gang problem, but all the rest, and suicide is clearly a mental health.
It's a mental health issue.
Right. In fact, 2/3 of all gun deaths in this country are suicides. 2/3. You'll hear this statistic: 40,000 people died from gunshot wounds last year. And what they don't tell you is 25,000 of that 40,000 were suicides. It's a mental health issue. And by the way, the other interesting statistic, it's a sad statistic, but it turns out that whether or not there are guns available or not, if there's guns available, yes, the gun will be the preferred method. But guess what? When there's no guns available, the suicide rate stays the same. A good example is Texas. Texas has a home ownership gun rate almost 40% greater than that of Colorado. Yet Colorado Texas has a higher suicide by gun rate than Colorado, but Colorado has a higher total suicide rate. So guns are less available in Colorado, but yet they have more suicides. So the only thing that changes is the method. Whether there's a gun available doesn't increase the amount of suicide. It only becomes the preferred method. So that's my rant. I apologize for making this podcast a little gun centric, but there's just so much.
No, we need all the energy that we put into gun laws. We need to put into mental health.
Right. And in mental health and also enforcement. Remember, the guy that shot the Michigan students was arrested for an illegal gun in 2019. That was a felony.
He shouldn't have been allowed to have that gun.
Right. And had he been prosecuted for that felony of having illegal possession of a gun, he wouldn't have been out on the street, nor would he have been able to legally purchase the 2 guns he used to kill those students. So we've got tons and tons of gun laws, but if prosecutors keep plea bargaining down felonies to misdemeanors, you're going to have the guys like the Michigan State shooter going out, be able to legally buy a gun. Anyway, I don't want to beat the dead horse because we'll probably wind up talking about this topic again. Shall we move on to some stories you didn't hear on TV? I don't think you heard on TV.
Sure.
I got 3 of them. Now, I don't know if you heard, but for instance, in Colorado, they spent millions of dollars to convert the Colorado Convention Center into an emergency field hospital for COVID patients. You know how many COVID patients they actually treated in the Colorado Convention Center?
I don't believe they treated any there.
That's correct. 0. And you know what the Jacob Javits Center in New York City is, right?
Yes.
Same deal. Millions and millions of dollars to convert the Javits Center into an emergency field hospital. No patients ever treated.
I believe they only used it for vaccine distribution.
Yeah, it became a vaccine, but they had beds, they had oxygen, they ran electricity so they could run, ventilators. No patients ever treated. So just to put the icing on the cake, New York City purchased 9.5 million items, COVID, everything from ventilators, respirators, defibrillators, and they spent $224 million on COVID related contracts at the peak of the pandemic in 2020, and they've auctioned them off. You know how much they got for that $224 million?
Less than half, I'm going to say.
How about 0.3 cents? They got $500,000. They lost 99.7%. They only recovered 0.3% of that equipment that no one used.
That's your tax dollars at work.
Can you imagine selling $224 million worth of equipment for $500,000? Again, that is 0.3 penny is what they recovered on those supplies. Now, here's another story I'm sure you didn't hear on TV. Now, it's a felony. You know what our national bird is?
It's the bald eagle.
Bald eagle. And if you shoot it, if you intentionally kill a bald eagle, it's a federal crime, right?
Yes, it is.
Well, in Nebraska, a local sheriff arrested 2 illegal aliens from Honduras for killing a bald eagle. And when he said, "Why did you do it?" they told him they intended to cook it and eat it. So, and by the way, in addition to killing a bald eagle, federal felony, they're also illegally in possession of a firearm, because if you're an illegal alien, you can't be in possession of a firearm. And they're also driving a vehicle without a license. So he was able to, arrest them for the illegal possession of a gun and driving a vehicle without a license. But since killing a bald eagle is a federal felony, so he had them locked up in his jail, and he called the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service office nearby and said, "Hey, I've got 2 guys here that just killed a bald eagle." Left messages with secretary, left voicemails. Nobody ever got back to him. So apparently the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has no interest in prosecuting illegal aliens for the killing of a bald eagle. Now, that may have changed, but this story was published. He said this story was 3 days old, and he had confirmed after 3 days, nobody from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had gotten back to him expressing any interest in prosecuting those 2 illegal aliens for their crime. So did you hear about that one on TV?
I did not hear about that.
Are you surprised?
I'm probably, I'm not surprised.
All right. And the third one, I'm going to tie Sweden into New York City. So it turns out that Sweden, which also has a migrant problem, they got people coming from Syria and every place else. They got people from North Africa, Somalia. So Sweden has come up with an interesting program, because Sweden has been housing and providing medical care and food and clothing. Sweden says, "Hey, we'll pay you to go back home." And they're paying them about $3,700. And a lot of them, they say, "No, $3,700. Yeah, that's a year's salary where I come from." And they're taking the money and leaving. Now, what do you think? You think that might be a good policy for New York City to adopt?
I'd say it would be worth a try for them to do it at this point.
Well, here's some stats that came out just this week. You know what's costing New York City per day per illegal alien to house them, feed them, clothe them, and provide them medical care? You know what it's costing them per day?
I'm going to say $100 a person per day.
Try $364 per day per illegal alien, which, by the way, comes to, and this is data published by the city of New York. You want to know what that comes to per day in terms of how much total at 364, what that comes to in total per day?
I forgot how many millions of immigrants the New York City is hosting right now.
Well, it comes out to $4.6 million per day.
Jeez.
So, but let's go back to that 364 figure. So in 30 days, they're spending $11,000 per illegal alien every 30 days at $364 a day.
So it would be worth them to offer $3,700 up.
Well, forget that. If I was the mayor of New York, I would offer them 20 grand. And by the way, if you're from Guatemala or Honduras, for 20 grand, you could buy a really nice house, and you could live like a king so trust me, I think if you were from Guatemala and somebody said, "Hey, If we give you $20,000, would you go home? How many people from Guatemala, Honduras would jump at that?
It's one way to find out, New York.
Yeah, can't hurt to try. And again, that would be 2 months. $20,000 per person would be just 2 months. So I think if I was the mayor of New York, I think I'd give it a try. I would start maybe with 10. I'd see him at 10,000, see how many people would jump at 10,000, then go to 15. Then just like when you're looking for passengers on an overbooked airline, right? They keep upping it till they get a volunteer.
Yep.
I would just start offering. I'd start at 10 grand and go up from there and see at what point people say, yeah, I'll take that and go back home. Again, if you're from Guatemala and you've been living on $4,000 a year in Guatemala and somebody offered you 5 years worth of income to go home, I understand you were living in a hut with no running water. And that's one of the reasons you came here. But if somebody said, here's 20 grand, you can go home and, get a house with electricity and running water, you might do it. All right. So you want to learn how to be smarter in 12 minutes a day?
Sure.
You got 12 minutes a day you could spare on average?
I could probably find some time.
All right. Well, here's what I discovered. I've watched over the years, I've watched Jeopardy occasionally, but it's kind of moving slow. They spend a lot of time on, introductions and where you're from and what's your, what's your job, et cetera, et cetera. And the other day I was watching Jeopardy and I, as usual, I learned some things. I said, why don't I set my DVR just to tape Jeopardy? And that way I can skip all of the commercials and the intros and, where you're from stuff. And I watched the first episode. You know how long it took me to watch Jeopardy without the commercial and the introductions?
Well, a 30-minute show is 22 minutes of actual time.
Right. And then you take out the introductions and the recaps and all this. I watched all the questions, all the answers, I should say, all the answers and all the questions in 12 minutes. And I've been doing this for about 2 weeks now. And I can guarantee you that there is not a single show where I haven't learned at least 3 things. So if you want to be smarter, tape Jeopardy. Now, there's stuff that I didn't know that I don't care to know. Like, for instance, some 18th century poet married so-and-so. I really don't care. I'm not going to remember it. So on average, I could answer 65, 70% of the questions. And of the other 30%, probably half of the other 30%, I have no interest in remembering, about which female poet married which composer. I really don't care. But there's always, 2, 3, 4 things that are very interesting, and I learned something. So,
somebody's going to call in and say that you need to be more cultured.
Well, if you want to be smarter, set your DVR to automatically record Jeopardy and just speed through it. And in 12 minutes a day, I guarantee you'll learn something every day. All right, let's talk about Russia. Any guess as to what the population of Russia is?
I want to say half of American, which is 330, so 150 million.
Very, very close. It's now, by the way, it used to be 149 million. It's now,
wow, I'm good.
It's now down to, but however, it has actually been shrinking for the past couple of years, 140. And over the past 12 months, here's what's happening. So it's been slowly contracting, but here's why that contraction is going to get a lot worse. Over the past year, 100,000 young men have either been killed or seriously wounded in the war with Ukraine. But in addition to that 100,000, you've heard that how many young men have been fleeing Ukraine, fleeing Russia to avoid the draft?
Yeah. I don't know the number, but yeah, I
800,000.
Wow.
So between those killed and wounded and those fleeing, Russia has lost almost 1 million men in their prime. And I say in their prime, it may not seem like a lot, but when you're talking about the guys in their 60s and 70s who are not likely to be fathering children anytime soon, they're not the ones that are leaving. These are the guys in their 18, 19, 20-year-old, 30-year-old. These are the ones that are leaving. So you can look for Russia's population, the acceleration in the rate at which their population is likely going to accelerate based upon all the young men either getting killed or fleeing the country.
And those that are fleeing, where are they going?
They're going to Belarus, Latvia, the Poland, just any of the border. What they've been going by car or train, so they've been going close. Now, Hershey chocolate. Have you seen the new woke?
I have.
So for those who are not familiar, so Hershey in Hershey, Pennsylvania, they've come out with a new woke pronoun bar. It's called the HER hyphen she, Hershey, the Hershey. It's the new woke. Well, there's another, they have a competitor called Jeremy's Chocolate. So Jeremy decided to come up with his own chocolate bar. And let me play you what this guy, Jeremy, he's come out with his own answer to their Hershey's Hershey bar. Here we go.
International Women's Day is upon us again. And I love an international woman. But our friends over at Hershey's, they don't even know what a woman is. They've hired a biological male to be the spokesperson for their Women's Day campaign. And they're calling that campaign, and I swear I'm not making this up, Hershey. Hershey. It's humiliating. And it's the reason that I'm launching Jeremy's Chocolate. We have two kinds, she, her, and he, him. One of them's got nuts. If you need me to tell you which one it is, keep giving your money to Hershey's.
So which one do you think has the nuts, Susan?
That's a good marketing campaign.
And this is real. This is
Yeah.
a real. It's Jeremy's Chocolate, and you just Google the ad. I think you can find it on YouTube. Talk about a great. He's got the she, her, and the he, him. One of them have nuts. You figure it out. All right, we got time for a taxpayer relief shot today.
Yeah, you have just about 5 minutes.
Good. Well, then I'll speed through it. Taxpayer relief shots for those not familiar. When a good guy or good woman with a gun shoots and kills a bad guy with a gun, it saves the taxpayers the cost of a jury trial and $75,000-$80,000 a year to keep the thug in jail. And here's how the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida, feels about it. Here we go.
If somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully, you'll save the taxpayers money.
And producers, so as you know, we also have Sheriff Grady Judge down there. Is a lot more loquacious and elegant, but we don't think we have time for that. So let me play you this one. So if you owned a jewelry store in Florida and 4 guys came with hoods over with black masks and gloves. By the way, if you see 4 guys in full body suits and wearing a ski mask and gloves in Orlando this time of year, do you think something might be strange?
Oh, yeah.
All right. And 4-on-1, you need to be able to defend yourself. So here's what happened to this jewelry store owner in a Florida mall.
Crime scene investigators are close to clearing the scene of a shooting at the Magic Mall. Orlando police say a shop owner shot 2 people after they tried to rob him. The Magic Mall is here in the area on the map. Take a look. It's on West Colonial Drive near John Young Parkway, across from the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Channel 9 Shannon Butler reports 2 suspects are still on the run tonight.
Here at the Magic Mall, there were 2 crimes.
By the way, 2 on the run. So your 2 buddies get killed. Do you stick around to help them?
Oh, they're out of there.
They're out of there. Here we continue.
Crime scenes and 2 people dead. This all happening while shoppers were inside. Today, those shop owners told us that this is their livelihood and they'll do whatever it takes to protect it. Ms. V was in her t-shirt shop when she heard gunfire at the shop next door.
They was running and tearing up and everything, trying to get out of here because you had to get down on the ground. When you hear gunshot, you gonna stay in there? No, I'm not.
These pictures were given to us by an owner. They show the jewelry store Orlando police officers say was robbed by 4 people. At least one of them was armed, but the shop owner was armed too, shooting at least 2 of them.
Did you see the guys? No, they was, by that time, they was out. We just saw the one on the floor in the vendor's booth. But yeah, it's normally we good, but we have to take care of ourselves. We have to.
One died inside the mall. The suspects fled the scene in this car. Another suspect found shot inside and died at the hospital. The other 2 are now on the run.
There's a lot of concealed licensed carriers here. So if you come to the Magic Mall and you want to commit a crime, it's a really good chance you might get shot. This is our livelihood. And you just don't come in and take snatch from somebody's livelihood.
Now, pictures shown to us from inside the mall that are too graphic for our viewers shows that the suspect was dressed in all black. They had a backpack and gloves on. Investigators are wiping for prints right now and again are still looking for other suspects. In Orlando, Shannon Butler, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
So we had one dead on the floor and one died at the hospital. So we have a DOA and what do we call the other guy who was dead on the floor?
Dead right there.
DRT. So one DOA, one DRT. All right. Producer Susan, anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, did you hear about any other interesting things happening down in the Hershey, Harrisburg area?
You mean that doesn't have to do with dogs or?
No, the interesting food items coming out of the Harrisburg, Hershey area.
I'm sorry. I meant, I skipped right over. For those of you who are health conscious and would like a little more protein with your ice cream, there's a new protein enriched ice cream that you can buy it in Harrisburg and other places. And it's cricket flavored ice cream. And if you think I'm kidding, you just Google cricket flavored ice cream. You can buy it, in many, many places. And Harrisburg, Pennsylvania is one of them. But if you're looking for a little protein or a little more crunch, if chocolate chips are not crunchy enough for you in ice cream, they've got chunks of cricket in the ice cream. So
great source of protein. I believe it's a company called Urban Churn out of Harrisburg.
Right. So cricket flavored ice cream for those who are looking for a little more protein.
Would you eat it, producer or Jerzee Joe? Would you try it?
If you offered me $500, I would, but no, not for that.
I'm adventurous. I'd try a spoonful just to see what it tasted like. Maybe not a whole bowl, but
no, yeah. I mean,
I've had chocolate covered crickets. It can't be much different, right?
Well, why don't you buy it next time you're in near Hershey? Why don't you go? Or Harrisburg, why don't you buy a gallon? Let me know, or buy a pint. How's that?
Right. Maybe just a cup.
All right, a cup. All right. Anyway, I want to thank all of you who listen to the podcast for giving up 30 minutes out of your busy day to listen to me ramble on about things that I find of interest and importance. I hope you found those topics as interesting and important as I did. And if so, I hope you continue to listen to the podcast in the weeks and months to come. If you want to see some of the materials and story links you heard me talk about today, you can find them on the Jerzee Joe website at Jerzee, J-E-R, as in Robert, Z as in zebra, E-E, JerzeeJoe.com. If you want to email me with a comment, question, or suggested show topic, you can do that just by sending me an email to just joe@JerzeeJoe.com. Just remember to spell Jersey with an R and a Z. And producer Susan, in a day or two, will have this podcast up on the audio version, and some of the show materials will be listed on the website as well. With that, I'll say good night. And producer Sue, anything else you want to add before we say good night?
Go try some cricket ice cream, and I'll see you next week.
All right, I will. Thanks for the reminder, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye. Bye.